Welcome, everyone, to the It's Official podcast. Jeremy Plonk here for First Bet and Express Bet. Flying the ship solo. Want to send out our best wishes, get well wishes to our partner, Jeff Siegel. We tackle 5 hot topics in horse racing each and every week here on the podcast. And this week, there is a lot of Saratoga and Del Mar on and off the track to talk about. We had one of the stars of the game in action last week, Sovereignty. We'll get to him in just a moment. But as we do each and every week here on the podcast, we start things off with what Jeff calls the Goosebump Award. Which horse got you most excited last week? Got you up out of your chair? Got the hair on your arms standing up as you watched him perform? Well, it was a short run between the Stars of Tomorrow segment and the Goosebump Award for a horse named Brant. We talked about Brant in this space last week as a future star to watch based on his workouts. The $3 million first-time starter debuted with absolute aplomb at Del Mar this past weekend. In fact, he's your Goosebump Award winner.
Flashy opening quarter mile in 21.56 seconds, and Brant is getting closer now to them in third, a length and a half off the lead. After that, it's El Rankin and Conducted on the outside. Coming to the top of the stretch, Civil Liberty. Here's Brant making his move on the outside. Balboa is back running in third as Brant takes command at the 8-pole. Brant to the front, opening up from Civil Liberty. Balboa is third, but it is all Brant. He looks like $1 million times 3. Brant by 5.
$3 million purchase price in March at the Ocala sale for this $200,000 yearling who was pinhooked for a huge profit. By Gun Runner, it was a 5 1/4 length win for the Bob Baffert trainee in 102 3. He went about 3 or 4 lengths off the track record set by Speedboat Beach, who was an outstanding sprinter. So really, this was an impressive first-time starting 2-year-old. The things about Brant, we certainly look at this horse as a Del Mar Futurity contender, major contender for that race. And then we'll see if he can go 2 turns. He's by Gun Runner, so you expect to get some distance. But the dam side of the pedigree was Papa Cap. The dam is a half to Papa Cap, a horse who was second in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile back in 2021 after winning the Best Pal. Never really excelled around 2 turns. Was second in the Pat Day Mile on the Woody Stevens as a 3-year-old. So the half to Papa Cap, the dam here, kind of gives me a little bit of sense that we might see some limitations with Brant. He might be a win early type for one. And secondly, a 1-turn horse. Also, the one thing about him is he's got a real beater action about him. I mean, he really swims on the left side. He doesn't have a very efficient stride. For a horse who costs $3 million, he really paddles quite a bit. And so these kind of horses can be very fast. Think of Vekoma and some others over the years, but not necessarily durable. Now, we did see some of that same action with Sierra Leone back earlier in his career, and he's been able to hold up and be fairly durable now racing into his 4-year-old campaign when campaign smartly. I don't want to make too much of a projection for Brant in terms of how long we're going to see him as a star, but he is already launched. It's one of the top 2-year-olds in America, and he really made an impressive debut. It was our Goosebump Award winner from Del Mar. Really a big-time performance from Brant. So he went from workout watch last week to a debut winner to the likely favorite for the Del Mar Futurity. It's going to be tough to see a better 2-year-old win so far, or the rest of the Del Mar meet. We're only a week or so into that meet, but I do not expect to see any more impressive 2-year-old than what we saw there from Brant. Let's go to our second topic this week. And when you don't get the Goosebump Award winner and you're the big name horse in training, that tells you a little bit of something about how impressive Brant was to me. But let's talk Sovereignty now. He definitely stands tallest amongst the 3-year-olds, the sophomore class. After his win last week in the Jim Dandy Stakes, all he did was really underline that. His wins in the Kentucky Derby and the Belmont Stakes, beating Journalism on the Square both times, beating on the Square by Baeza 2 times in those races, already made him the tall horse in the crop. No question, but now he really does stand out with his Jim Dandy win. There doesn't seem to be any kind of let up into the second half of the season for Sovereignty. Let's go back and take a look at the Jim Dandy Stakes last Saturday from Saratoga with Frank Miramati on the mic, and we'll dissect this performance.
Made that bid, but drops back, and then Sandman there at the top of the stretch. Sovereignty is up to take the lead. He and Baeza in close quarters, but Sovereignty has the upper hand in mid-stretch. Baeza is trying his best to cling to him, but it's Sovereignty and Junior Alvarado still on top. And still with plenty left in the tank. Sovereignty scores in the Jim Dandy. Baeza ran lights out, but he ran into Sovereignty. It was a long way back to a three-way photo for third. The Kentucky
9 1/4 lengths back to third. So the top two there really put it on the rest of the field. As expected in the 5-horse field, it looked top heavy. I mean, the other horses in that in that race had some ability to them. Hill Road, of course, a horse who was placed in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile last year. And also in there was Sandman, the winner of the Arkansas Derby. But blinkers on for Sandman did not work out for him. He was 2 lengths off the pace, ended up 10 back. Instead of being 10 back and trying to rally and get beat by 3 or 4, which is kind of his MO, they changed the tactics. It didn't work for Sandman. That rarely does work. Really, this race was about the top two. Baeza came back and ran his race again. He continues to be rock solid. He doesn't have a stakes win to his credit, but what we saw out of him in the Santa Anita Derby, the Kentucky Derby, the Belmont, and now the Jim Dandy, he's obviously one of the 3 or 4 top 3-year-olds in this crop, and he continues to do so with, really respectable performances. Is once he gets away from a horse like Sovereignty or Journalism, I don't think anybody else is going to be able to knock off Baeza. It'll be a question of where they want to go with him. I would think Pennsylvania Derby would be a really good spot for him to be a favorite. I don't think you're going to see Sovereignty. He goes to the Travers next, obviously. I don't think you'll see Journalism. He's back on the West Coast. I think he goes Pacific Classic and stays west. So instead of going against older horses in the Pacific Classic and Journalism, for Baeza, really, to me, the best race for him moving forward would be the Pennsylvania Derby, where he would be a very strong favorite, I would have to think, in the PA Derby. Magnitude, one of the top 3-year-olds early in the season with that dominant performance in the Risen Star. He's come back to win here in the summer, and he is being pointed towards the Travers as well. So you should get a shot with Magnitude going head-to-head with Sovereignty to kind of, look at some of those horses that are different ends of their form cycle, if you will. If Sovereignty still is strong, racing all the way through the campaign, if Magnitude might be able to step up in the Travers, that's kind of what we're talking about in this 3-year-old class right now. I don't think we're going to see Sovereignty against Journalism again until the Breeders' Cup Classic, and let's cross our fingers that we get that kind of matchup in the Breeders' Cup, because there's a great older division shaking out that we'll talk about in just a moment. As for the Jim Dandy performance and Sovereignty, where do you think he is right now? Look, it was a length victory. The time isn't anything special, 149 and change in there. 148.99 is the only time we've seen a horse go sub 49 in the Jim Dandy over the last 9 years or so, that being Epicenter, and he only did it by 100th of a second. So you don't expect to see blazing times at 1 1/8 at Saratoga. Remember, it's 1 1/8 oval, not a mile oval. So really, when they start off, they go almost right into the clubhouse turn. You don't get the same kind of times, I think, going 1 1/8 at the Spa as you do at some other racetracks. So while the time doesn't look that great on paper, 149.52, remember in race number 4 on Saturday, older allowance horses, including Arthur's Ride, who had won the Whitney the previous year, they only went 150.48. So that was a good, solid, 5-6 lengths almost slower than what we saw Sovereignty go in winning the Jim Dandy. So I thought it was a good performance for Sovereignty in there. He went about 37 seconds the last 3 furlongs. They didn't come home super fast, 12 and 3, but they came home a lot faster than those older horses did in Allowance Company. It was a slow racetrack and surface at Saratoga on Saturday. So I thought it was a very good effort from Sovereignty. I don't think he's taken any steps back, and I think he's going to be very, very tough to beat in the Travers Stakes. The 1 1/4 is more of his game, the way he just grinds you down. You can think that Magnitude, could be brilliant, but 1 1/4 in the Travers, I can't see Magnitude outrunning him all the way for 1 1/4. Jim Dandy, nice performance by Sovereignty, nice performance by Baeza. I think those two held their own. As for the others in there, I don't think Hill Road is a top class 3-year-old in this crop. He'll try to go to the Travers, I'm sure, at 1 1/4 because he did pass some horses in the Jim Dandy. The distance certainly won't be a negative for him. So I think you get another Jim Dandy to Travers starter there with Hill Prince or Hill Road. And as far as Sandman goes, I'm not sure what they're going to do with Sandman. Sandman might be another horse that you want to look at the PA Derby for. I don't think he wants to go super far. I never thought he was a 1 1/4 horse. I think he's better at 1 1/16, and I think he's going to be best down the road like War of Will was, the Preakness winner for Mark Cassidy a couple years back. I think he's going to actually turn out to be a turf miler at some point and have a better turn of foot in a shorter distance with a faster pace. I just don't think he's a sustained closer, a Sandman, and by putting the blinkers on, they tried that as an experiment. That blew up in the Jim Dandy. I don't see him going to the Travers and trying to revert back to the closing tactics. I don't think that's the best move for him. I like to see him in the Pennsylvania Derby, maybe a race he could win. Baeza and Sandman in the Pennsylvania Derby might be one to watch there. We'll see what they want to do with Sandman moving forward, though. But he certainly didn't get anything positive out of this performance in the Jim Dandy Stakes. We talked about the older horses, which will be the test for these 3-year-olds when we get to the end of the calendar year. Well, the 3-year-old class is going to have some real challenges amongst the older horses because Nysos flashed his classic hype last week in winning the San Diego Stakes at Del Mar. We'll take a look at that and talk about this Bob Baffert trainee who is back on the beam. And then we'll look ahead to the Whitney Stakes coming up this weekend. The Whitney at Saratoga on Saturday, maybe the race of the year. So let's go back first before we look ahead and go back to the San Diego, where it was Nysos at Del Mar.
Nysos continues to sit right on the rail with 3 furlongs to go. He's got 2.5 lengths to make up. Flavien Prat starting to motivate him just a little bit. He's going to need some running room here. His stablemate has been in front all the way so far. It is Miramati on top. Where's Nysos going to go? He's down on the inside. Hall of Fame is right up alongside of them. Then Tarantino and Express Train, and they're into the stretch with Miramati to catch. Nysos finds a seam now, and here he comes at the 8th pole, bounding by Miramati, and then on the outside it's Hall of Fame and Tarantino, but it is Nysos and Flavien Prat running away, and the San Diego in hand at the end to beat his stablemate Miramati. Tarantino was 3rd, and 4th was Hall of Fame.
So Hall of Fame comes west. He was with Steve Asmussen and sent west now to Michael McCarthy's barn and gives us a little bit of a barometer on the Eastern Handicap Division versus the West. And it seemed like Hall of Fame was about as effective on the East Coast as he was in the West. Not a factor in here against Nysos and Miramati. I don't think this was a particularly strong field, obviously, that Nysos beat. He was 1-9 for a reason. Miramati, the runner-up, not a horse certainly at longer distances that you have a ton of respect for. So he was able to hold second in there. It tells you that nobody really ran on from the back. Nysos did show an ability to rate, come between horses. I thought it was a very professional and good prep race for him moving forward. At a mile and a 16th, a race like this in the San Diego sets him up now towards the Pacific Classic, and we'll see him at a mile and a quarter and whether or not he can go that far. Nysos has won 5 of 6 lifetime. He was second in the Churchill Downs Handicap sprinting on the Derby Day undercard in that tremendous race where he dead heated for second, a neck behind mind frame when there was 5-6 horses all within a length of each other at the wire in what has been the race of the year to this point, the Churchill Downs Handicap. That's only the only defeat on the ledger right now for Nysos, who's 5 for 6 lifetime. He is 2 for 2 around 2 turns. He won the Bob Lewis as a 3-year-old. Now here at age 4, he gets his first Elder Stakes win around 2 turns, winning the San Diego. I don't know if he's a mile and a quarter horse. I think he's better at the Breeders' Cup dirt mile distance. They're going to find out which way they go after the Pacific Classic, obviously. If he can't sustain and he can't run on at a mile and a quarter in the Pacific Classic, then they probably cut back and look at Nysos as a Breeders' Cup dirt mile horse. I don't think they cut all the way back to 3/4 and try the Breeders' Cup sprint, obviously, although he ran really well in the 7/8 of a mile Churchill Downs Handicap. But I think Breeders' Cup dirt mile for Nysos, he could be a very, very heavy favorite in a race like that. Whereas the Breeders' Cup Classic, we're going to know after he goes the mile and a quarter at Del Mar. I'm inclined to think that he might be okay to that. The 3rd dam for Nysos, he's by Nyquist, of course, a Kentucky Derby winner at a mile and a quarter and a champion 2-year-old. He's out of a Bernardini mare. Bernardini, of course, a mile and a quarter winner and Breeders' Cup Classic runner-up back in 2006. But the 3rd dam for Nysos is Unbridled Elaine, who won the Breeders' Cup Distaff in her heyday back in 2001. So, great grandma got a mile and an 1/8 at the top level, and there's a lot of stamina on the dam side of the pedigree. Nysos obviously brilliantly fast, and he's got the brilliance on top by Nyquist. So I don't see why he couldn't go a mile and a quarter. We'll see if he's fit to that point now. Baffert will train him, obviously, up to the Pacific Classic, where he could meet journalism. And maybe this performance by Nysos will make the connection to journalism rethink going into the Pacific Classic, because there was really no heavyweights in the Southern California Handicap Division. Some Eastern-type horses came west and did pretty well earlier this year in the Big Cap and the Gold Cup at Santa Anita, the Hollywood Gold Cup. So this division's been asking on the West Coast for somebody to kind of step up, whether it be one of the 3-year-olds like Baeza or Journalism on the West Coast, or one of the older horses, kind of middle distance types like Nysos stretching out. One of those was kind of going to assert themselves to the top of the division, you would think, by the Pacific Classic. We're going to find out coming up in a couple weeks at Del Mar. Now, we're going to find out this weekend where the Eastern Handicap Division and the Breeders' Cup Classic Division shakes out a little bit more, because we've got 10 entered already for Saturday's big one, the Grade 1. Whitney, more than $1 million on the line. Fierceness, you see pictured there on the right, will be one of the headliners in this race. He is expected to run, and his stablemate Mindframe is expected to scratch. Unless something comes up between now and race day, Todd Pletcher says he'll take Mindframe out and keep Fierceness in the race amongst his two entries in here. Skippy Longstocking and White Abarrio both entered in here for Saffy Joseph. You could possibly see Skippy Longstocking come out of this race as well. A field of 10 entered, but again, we do not expect all 10 of these to go. The ones we do expect to go, though, gives us a showdown rematch. Sierra Leone, last year's Breeders' Cup Classic winner. Fierceness, last year's Breeders' Cup Classic runner-up. They could be back together in a showdown. At Del Mar, they put on quite a show last year. At the end of the year, what do they have in store for us at the spa for this summer?
Around the far turn, Fierceness. Fierceness has taken over the lead. Newgate on the attack. Sierra Leone is revving up on the far outside with a burst toward the front runners as they come to the top of the stretch. And they're into the stretch. And Sierra Leone has circled up on the outside to take the lead. Fierceness battles on second. Newgate behind them. Forever Young on the far outside. Sierra Leone. Fierceness digs in. Newgate. Forever Young. Sierra Leone close to home. Sierra Leone does it in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Fierceness was second. Forever Young was third. Newgate fourth.
Now, that was 1.25 miles in the Breeders' Cup Classic, keep in mind. At 1.125 miles in the Whitney, speed certainly and post position are a bit more important now. So Fierceness to the outside as they go into that clubhouse turn with a quick run. Doesn't have the best post here, but he's obviously faster than Sierra Leone early. So he's going to have some tactical advantage in this particular race. White Abarrio was the Whitney winner a couple years ago before winning the Breeders' Cup Classic. So not only do we have a rematch of last year's 1-2 Breeders' Cup Classic finish, we've got a matchup of the last two Breeders' Cup Classic winners when you take a look at Sierra Leone and White Abarrio in the matchup there. Post time to the outside, Brittany Russell, trainee coming from Maryland potentially, is a horse who's done tremendous work at middle distances. We'll see about the 1.125 miles at this level in the Whitney. Has run well in the past at the Spa in races like this. Post time certainly a fan favorite and will be coming with the late run. But at Saratoga, going 1.125 miles, tactical speed is awfully impressive and awfully useful in these races. So I would think horses like White Abarrio and Fierceness, who can show a bit more early speed than some of the others, could be tactically advantaged. We'll handicap the Whitney Stakes and all the big races at Saratoga. In fact, 5 graded stakes races on the Spa card coming up this Saturday. 4 grade 1s and a grade 2 in the Sanford, I believe it is, for the 2-year-olds. So we're going to get a chance to see, I think, Saratoga Special, actually, not the Sanford Stakes, but the Saratoga Special. So really good card coming up Saturday. We will handicap those races for you on the Friday podcast, First Call, when I'm joined by guest handicapper Scott Shapiro. So be sure to check that out. Same place you get this podcast. You can check out our Friday podcast, First Call, as well. Now, we are talking Del Mar, and there have been a lot of people showing anxiety online about the late odds drops at Del Mar. In fact, who you going to call, we're asking here. Of course, the play on words for the Ghostbusters, but call computer-aided wagering, computer-assisted wagering. The calls are the computers that are dominating the betting markets nowadays, and just a handful of major operations worldwide betting into the U.S. tote system, legally doing so according to the rules and the different outlets, associations, and racetracks who allow them to play into their betting pools. Del Mar being one of those, and there have been some major odds drops in races at Del Mar early in their race meeting. Marshall Graham does a really nice job. I believe he's an economics professor, but a professor who's really good with numbers out of Tennessee. He's got a good Twitter handle, and he had mentioned in the first 70 races of the Del Mar meet that he has tracked 40 of the winners, the odds dropped at post time. 30 of the winners, the odds raised a bit at post time, but the amount of the raise certainly smaller, the amount of the drops in a larger, more alarming rate. So the calls that are getting late action into the tote, the computer assisted wagering, really having an impact on what you can expect as a bettor when you're betting into these pari-mutuel pools. Massive odds drops really kind of set the tone for people's distrust of the wagering system. And so that's something that Del Mar has decided to address. And they announced today, Del Mar Racetrack is going to stop call wagering on their betting product with 2 minutes to post time. So we have seen this in the New York Racing Association tracks have cut wagering from the calls at 3 minutes to post. So you don't get that late odds drop during the course of the race when so much of a percentage of the betting is coming in. In some of these pools, calls are over 50% of the pool. Nationally, their handle is about 33, 1/3 of the handle is coming through just a few outlets worldwide betting into these call pools. So the wagers who are betting here on these races are going to get a bit more fair look at what they're going to get at Del Mar when it comes to win odds, but this will not be a part of any of the other pools. So Play, Show, Exacta, all the exotics, the calls are certainly welcome to bet in them, just as they are in New York. So this serves to help a bit in terms of public perception, right? The big odds drops. In fact, some tracks have gone to not even putting the odds up on the screen during the in-running until the final cycle has clicked through to kind of avoid that odds drop and the bad look. I mean, that's kind of protecting against kind of semantics and public relations, which I'm not for. And to take the calls out of the win pool is a step in the right direction, but it's certainly not a major alleviation to the problem. I think it takes away some of the public perception and the public relations. But when you look, I mean, people who have closely looked at Saratoga, Aqueduct, Belmont at Aqueduct over the past year or so, I think it's been, 4 years now almost since NYRA closed the calls out of the pool at 3 minutes to post in New York. The exactas and the tries are paying much less than what the win pool corresponding odds might show. So any inefficiency that might be left in the win pool now by cutting the calls off at 2 or 3 minutes to post is being taken out of the exactas and the try pools in a lot of cases, and the multi-race bets as well. So I don't know that this is any sort of positive solution. I think it's a step in the right direction, but just a step indeed at that. As what I would call myself, even a recreational bettor, I'm certainly not playing 7 days a week at major volume like a call would or a professional gambler would. As a recreational player and somebody who likes to attack with spot plays and sequences where I feel like I have some advantage, where there's carryovers and where I have strong opinions and try to spot up, it is very difficult to bet against the calls. I mean, you've got to get paid when you're right in this game. That's what I've always taught and preached, going back to the days when we did the night school fan education instruction in Horse Player Now. Get paid when you're right is my number one rule in horse racing. Well, if the prices are all being drawn down and you're not getting those overlays, you got to make a score when your opinion's right. If there's if the pools are so efficient because of the cause now that you can't get any of those overlay prices, in fact, you're even getting maybe a bit of an underlay price sometimes in what you were hoping to get, it makes it very difficult on a retail player, as they're known as, a retail customer, a recreational player. So this is something we've really got to look at as an industry. This is a step in the right direction. I think it's going to put some pressure on other racetracks, obviously. In New York, there's no pressure because NYRA kind of runs everything. I mean, Finger Lakes is also in New York, but they kind of do their own thing. When you look at California, on the other hand, though, Los Alamitos, owned by separate entity. Of course, Del Mar, run by the fair. And, of course, Santa Anita by this parent company of this podcast, First Bet by First Racing. There's going to be pressure with Del Mar cutting the calls out of the pool at 2 minutes to post, what the other locales do in Southern California. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, how long they stay with it. We've seen changes in things over the years that didn't stick because it really affected and impacted handle poorly. Think of post-time drags as something that was like that. We cut all betting off after the Fix 6 incident back in the 2002 Breeders' Cup. For some of our younger fans out there, there was a betting incident with the pass last posting in 2002 at the Breeders' Cup, Valponi in that race involved with the pick 6. And after that, a lot of tracks went immediately after that to cutting off betting at post time so that there wouldn't be any late odds drops. There wouldn't be any late money in the pool. There'd be no cycled wagering 30 seconds after they come out of the starting gate. Handle dropped and bettors didn't adapt to it, and tracks caved very quickly in that and went back to you can bet up until the horses leave the starting gate and the bell, and did not cut the betting off at post time. So, post time drag is something that some tracks have done, like Gulfstream, and now have gone back and reverted to it after getting rid of it. It was good PR to get rid of it, but then you see the handle numbers and you go back to it because it effectively helps your bottom line. It'll be interesting to see what happens here with the call wagering moving forward and the pressure that Del Mar's move, at least in the win pool, will have on some other racetracks, maybe even within that same Southern California circuit. Will others follow suit? We will find out. Certainly, we will be watching it closely. We've talked for years in horse racing and serious horse racing players and fans and journalists and commentators like myself of finding the optimum pricing in horse racing. What should that optimum takeout be that doesn't discourage bettors, gives the track and the state and the horsemen the right cut of the bet that they need, and actually encourages more wagering by putting more money back into the system through winning tickets and gets recycled and rebet? What is that optimum level? And there have been very few good studies done on that, nor tracks or racing associations and circuits willing to take any kind of serious look at it. They kind of stick with what they do in terms of, the taxation on each bet, the takeout. And when you're run by state racing organizations and commissions, you can kind of understand that, right? Nobody at your state level or the federal level is interested in lowering your taxes. So this is kind of the betting market and the betting life that we live here, with all these state regulated agencies. But what is the optimum level on takeout? We've never really found out. We need to find out what is the optimum level of input from these calls. Like, what kind of rebate can you give the cause where they're still interested in playing? What kind of level of rebate can you give the cause that doesn't take a major disadvantage to your retail bettors and your recreational bettors? What level and minutes to post are still acceptable for the cause that they want to play into your pools, but at the same time, you do not disadvantage your players? We need to find all these different optimum levels and find out what pools maybe there's restricted pools where call can be in one pool but not another. Some tracks have taken them out of a pick 5, one of the pick 5s, that sort of thing like that. We need to find out what is the optimum level of call play in horse racing, because it's here to stay. I don't think it's going anywhere unless there would be some kind of challenge to it legally to take it out of the system. It's just too big of an elephant in the room, and I don't think you're going to see the cost coming out of horse racing. So what we have to do is figure out how we coexist with them, what levels are satisfactory to give and to give to the other side, and try to make this a more balanced game and give retail bettors their best fighting chance. So who are you going to call? Well, certainly talk to your racetrack operators, your legislators in your area, and, support your racetracks that do the right things for you. When you see a low takeout wager, when you see a sequence that might be reduced in takeout, try to take advantage of those offers. When you get promotions from your ADW, if there's a particular offer made on a race or a day of racing somewhere, bet X amount, get so much back in a rebate. Take advantage of all those kind of opportunities you can to try to level the playing field some, and play in handicapping tournaments. We talk about the cause poaching the pari-mutuel market, but in the handicapping tournament scene, you're not going to get involved in as much of that. And most handicapping tournaments have a very set parameter on what you're wagering for the day. For instance, the Fun in the Sun handicapping tournament Express Bet on Saturdays is $10 win bets, so you can't get priced out by a call in there. You get one entry, you make your play for $10. They can't Dutch a field. A lot of times with these call bets, it's not necessarily the perception from the public is that they're always on the right horse, and that's not the case. They are playing proportionally on various prices of horses that have any sort of overlay to them. So their algorithms do a good job of identifying what the fair value on a horse should be. And when they get to that last click of the odds and the advantage they have being tied directly into the tote system, they know that if they make X number of dollar wager on this horse with what is projected to go in from the general public on the last click as well, what this horse's off odds will be. How much do they need to bet on this horse to get the result that they want? Because they might be betting on a horse to hedge against another. I mean, we look at this race on Saturday, the Bing Crosby Stakes at Del Mar, and this is the one that kind of put people on full tilt and went over the top on the call wagering and really created a ruckus online. And I think Del Mar responded to that online ruckus with their, policy change that will start on Thursday in terms of cutting the calls out at 2 minutes to post there in Southern California. This race at Del Mar, the Bing Crosby, the winner was 45-1 at post time, dropped to 38-1. And by the time they got to the wire, it was 18 or 19-1. Lovesick Blues might turn out to be one of those horses who is a telltale when we see maybe a change in trajectory in the wagering landscape. Let's go back and take a look at Lovesick Blues. I don't think this is a horse that the calls had any inside info on. I think he was a big overlay price at that time. They were betting this horse significantly at the end to get him back to where his fair odds were, which was somewhere in the ballpark of 20-1.
Still Crazy Mason as they come to the top of the stretch. It is Hijazi and Juan Hernandez turning for home in front in the Bing Crosby. They've got a 2.5 length lead. And then Roll On Big Joe in second. Lovesick Blues has run a big one on the outside and is trying to close the gap at 18-1. Here comes Lovesick Blues on the outside. And Lovesick Blues and Giovanni Franco have won the Bing Crosby. And Hijazi.
So that was the one. I think that's the one that kind of was the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will, from the public. And it was such a high-profile race, being a Breeders' Cup win and you're in, a Grade 1 at Del Mar. Later in the day, away from the spotlight from some of the other tracks, it didn't sneak up on anybody. When it happened, it was a big, glaring red flag exclamation point, and the public responded to it. Del Mar responded to it with their change in policy. We'll see how it shakes out. But the Bing Crosby, I think, may go down someday. If we see some changes in how calls are treated in America, the Bing Crosby Stakes might be one of those watershed moments that we talk about. Let's go to our fifth and final topic this week on It's Official. As we do each and every week, we wrap up with our Stars of Tomorrow segment. Last week, we talked about Brant. He came back and debuted the next weekend at Del Mar. We're talking about some horses, though, this week that just did debut. Let's start off with Tommy Joe for Todd Pletcher. This is a 2-year-old filly up at Saratoga who was very impressive in her career debut.
They're at the top of the stretch, and Tommy Joe has run right by, taken command, and opening up at the 8th pole. Tommy Joe by 4. Academia, Tennessee Belle moving in tandem after this leader who is well in front. Tommy Joe, Johnny V and Todd Pletcher teaming up. A resounding win for Tommy Joe, handridden by 4 lengths. Tennessee Belle second, Academia third, and Immortalize finish 4th.
Big effort there from Tommy Joe by Into Mischief out of Mother Mother. Mother Mother was a filly who was pretty good. Del Mar debutante runner-up as a 2-year-old. Later on became a $400,000 earning sprint filly. Mother Mother trained by Bob Baffert. Into Mischief gets some routers, but also gets a lot of sprinters as well. I think this is a 2-year-old filly, Spendthrift Farm, homebred, that we can expect to see short. I don't look at this filly, Tommy Joe, as a big-time route prospect, but she looks like a 2-year-old filly with a sprint future ahead of her. We'll see what they want to do with her. They can certainly go all the way up to 7/8 of a mile at Saratoga, and they can stay around 1 turn on the New York circuit, even to the Frizette later in this year. I don't know if she's a Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies horse around 2 turns, but all the way up through the Frizette Grade 1 around 1 turn, you can stay in those 1-turn races in New York. So Tommy Joe, one to certainly watch. Another one that we want to give an honorable mention to is a 3-year-old filly named Usha. Usha, of course, the name of the second lady of the United States, Usha Vance. She's a 3-year-old filly by Tiz the Law, and this is a filly who won her 5th career start. She's a 3-year-old filly just breaking her maiden, but she's one of those nibbler breaks out angles that you want to keep an eye on. A filly who was close, and then when she won, she just blew their doors off. 11.5 length victory for Usha for trainer Bob Baffert. She looks like she could be a good one as well. She's our honorable mention this week. But our star of tomorrow will be Tommy Joe. This is a 2-year-old filly with a big-time sprint future in New York. Let's review our 5 topics this week on It's Official. The Goosebump Award this week went to the 2-year-old Brant. Ran like a $3 million horse in the career debut. We'll see where this gun runner colt ends up, but most likely the Del Mar Futurity. Sovereignty continues to stand tallest amongst the sophomore class with his 1-length victory in the Jim Dandy over his rival Baeza. 3rd time he's knocked off Baeza so far this year. We expect to see Sovereignty next up in the Travers Stakes. Nysos, now 5 for 6 lifetime after winning the San Diego Handicap. He passed his 2-turn test and should head next to the Pacific Classic, maybe in a showdown with the 3-year-old Star Journalism. The Whitney Stakes awaits this week. Looking forward to a rematch of last year's Breeders' Cup Classic 1-2 finishers when we see Sierra Leone and Fierceness, and also in their White Barrio, winner of the Breeders' Cup Classic 2 years ago. Big week coming in the Classic division. Who are you going to call? We talked about the computer-assisted wagering issues that are taking over around the country, certainly specifically to Del Mar last week, and Del Mar's new policy that they announced for Thursday, that they will cut off wagering from the computer-assisted wagering groups with 2 minutes to post, beginning with Thursday's card at Del Mar. And our star of tomorrow was Tommy Joe for trainer Todd Pletcher. This is an Into Mischief colt out of Mother, or filly, I should say, 2-year-old filly with a big-time sprint future. Those 5 topics are now official because Jeff Siegel and I say so. That's the way we play the game here. And we'll do it all again in 7 days' time when we come back next Tuesday, reviewing a big weekend at the spa. As we mentioned, 4 grade 1s, including the Whitney. We've got the Hamiltonian this weekend. If you're a harness player, a huge weekend of action there at the Meadowlands. And, of course, Del Mar's going to have another big week. And very curious to see what happens with the Del Mar wagering pools. Will value start to be pulled by the calls out of the exacta and tri pools intra-race and some of the multi-race wagers? Will some of that call money cut off at 2 minutes to post, leave Del Mar and go to some other racetracks? It'll be interesting to take a look at some of the other tracks around the country and see if there's any impact on their wagering pools. A lot to dissect. We'll talk about it all next week. Between now and then, have a great week, everybody. I'll see you on Friday when Scott and I are back for the First Call podcast. Take care.